Um, well, I'm the last presenter, and that's always very hard, especially if you got the topics of laws and building codes. But I will try not to bore you too much. A short outline of my presentation. I will start with some general remarks regarding obstacles implementing green, climate resilient, and nature inclusive cities. Then we'll introduce a kind of theoretical concept we developed to structurized analysis of those implementation obstacles. Maybe you heard the term of climate proofing once before, and then of course some flashlight out of the practice. What are the real obstacles we're facing when we try to implement green and nature inclusive cities? And then of course some concluding remarks. Well, the presentation is based on a lot of different research projects where we always try to find ways to also legally implement the good ideas we heard today. Yeah, but there's a lot to tell, so let's dive right in. What we also have, especially in Austria, we like a lot strategies. So we've got climate change adaptation strategies, we've got climate change mitigation strategies, we've got green infrastructure, nature-based solution strategies, we've got planning strategies which try to incorporate green and climate resilient implementation. And then of course we have got different implementation strategies on national level, federal, state level, city level, and of course, like manuals like the Biotope Cindy manual. But as we all know, paper is patient and there is an implementation gap to really bring down measures to earth. So we developed within a research project a theoretical framework to analyze what's necessary to really make climate proofing, to develop climate resilient and green cities. I don't want to go into detail because otherwise I will spend my whole 10 minutes on explaining that illustrations. Just pose two major questions we were asking ourselves. One is, are the planning processes and tools suitable? And of course, we always need framework conditions that should be suitable to implement green cities. We will focus on just one aspect of those many framework conditions that have to be fulfilled. We will have a closer look on the legal aspects. But first, starting with some general shortcomings regarding the implementation of green and climate resilient planning. Well, the core question is, do we know what we have to do? And there's still a lack of data. We heard a lot about different forms of data, how to analyze, to quantify the effects of urban green infrastructure. But what's most critical, that most of these instruments are not mandatory. They're not uniform. Every city makes their own stuff. Every federal state makes their own stuff. So nothing could be compared. There are no standards at all. So there's of course a need of change also regarding the legal framework. And another critical challenge is, well, it's, I think, still an unsolved problem in planning. So if you got any ideas to overcome the shortcoming of how to incorporate future developments in actual planning, please post it in the chat. And this is a critical point because most of the planning laws in Austria, this is actually not taking into account at all how to deal with future developments when you have to decide right now. And that's especially for decision makers very difficult to decide under uncertainties. So another central challenge, and that's, well, maybe an Austrian point of view, we've got a very decentralized planning system. So we have got 9 different planning laws in such a big country as Austria. And what's also very important, especially for the administrations, that they have the aims anchored for in planning laws. So we analyze within a project all the different federal states planning laws regarding the implementation of climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. Yeah, Well, most of the planning laws in Austria, meanwhile, implemented climate change mitigation as an aim. But regarding climate change adaptation, only 3 out of 9 federal states' planning laws take care of that aspect. And what's also the point, climate change adaptation is always just voluntary, but not obligatory. They give the municipalities the possibility to work with the problem, to deal with those aspects, but not obligatory. And another question was, so are the processes and planning instruments suitable we are using? And in principle, the answer is yes. As we have seen today, we know how to plan climate resilient and green cities. But in reality, there are some obstacles. So let's a closer look on some examples. The first one deals with adaptation in public space and the incorporation of people doing adaptation. Also heard quite often today how important it is to incorporate laypersons into the adaptations of our cities. So we had a research project in the Seestadt Aspern. Maybe some of you know one of the biggest urban development projects in Austria and the whole Europe, I think. And yeah, there are a lot of initiatives already going on there. We've made a map collecting the different approaches, the initiatives, the different public spaces they're using. And we accompanied also some project the people wanted to develop there. And one quite simple idea at the first place is let's grow wine. Inhabitant of the building in the back wanted to plant wine on a sandy area in front of the house because it's very windy there and the sand always blows around. So he thought maybe a greening would be interesting. Then he handed this project in at the city administrations, and after a rally through different planning departments of the city of Vienna, he finally got the okay, but you have to sign a contract. And reading the contract, the initiator refused to implement the project. He would be responsible for everything, has to pay a security deposit, has to pay rent for using the public space. And reading through these 3 pages, he decided not to implement the project. But finally, we found a solution for those problems after some 2 years, but the initiator isn't interested any longer, which I could understand. But at least for future projects, it should be easier to implement those projects. And actually, the inhabitants are implementing other projects very successfully in Seestadt Aspern. So one obstacle which has to become solved.
Florian, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, we've got 3 minutes left.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You know what that means if I'm saying
Yeah.
something. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Another challenge in the city of Vienna is the so-called gärtnerische Ausgestaltung, the horticultural design, or another term that sealing of these areas is only possible to the necessary extent. But nobody defined what is a horticultural design and what is to the extent necessary. So we found examples like this single-family house in Vienna, where all the not built-up areas should be greened, but everything is sealed. The drive is sealed, the so-called front garden is sealed, the garden is sealed up to 95% is sealed up. If you've missed it, that's the connection remaining to the soil. So of course, this has to be changed, and also the city of Vienna is working on that too. We are into a research project and they made working groups to change the planning law. Same problem with another city in Austria. We developed together with the city of Salzburg a green and open space factor, made a manual how to implement that in planning processes on the level of zoning planning, finished everything, and then we heard, yep, nice, but cities are not allowed to issue corresponding ordinances. So the legal basis must first be created. And luckily, good news that the state legislature is ready to make changes to change the federal planning law, and they started a working group. So to come to the conclusion, maybe start with a statement I hear quite often. It's a German statement, eine Bauordnung ist keine Baumordnung. It works better in German than in English. That means a building code is not a tree code. But as we have seen, almost all planning laws already take climate change mitigation into account, and we are in a good way that they also take climate change adaptation into account. We've got some, for example, some new dedication categories in land use planning, like sustainable residential areas or clearance areas for climate change adaptation. So to conclude with a nautic metaphor, regularly Helga Fassbinder is using, at least the tanker is moving. It takes some time and effort, but at least it is moving. Thanks a lot.